That's it, indeed.
Tigre.
Oh yeah, lots of. Oh, that's enough what it does, yes. Oh, Jesse Chimbushivale, song letter, Junjuk of Sungudwa. Then Jundin in Yevashinduka, give you to do toward Cubala. Getting Dilla Pemba Maduna Chidi and Dajova Kala Jursa. Oh, she's from Banashira. Sanjay Jumden, Judean comes to at the Pecumbo. Gave a manso and Mimbuchet Mato. Mimbeke Mato, Tremeke Omera. That the rain gave on Dinalia, Sanjay Jumden, the chair. Chu tanda chu manu che ganga gyuma cheba ne tebe kabdilro ne ngarazo chu chu bala tebe tunji ganga cha ran gejin ganga gejin kan me tunji ganga cha we ro chu chu bala telshi jorba sama cha we kabdila sigora o dinde de pe kuma boji sabale teni jongur mato lela bache yong ayo mardo 자 신도 내니에 가와리서 교소 된전 선바데 신도 가와이 베나 제분 된전 신도 니에 가와레스 된주되는 니버 신도 가송고도 야 디실랍샤나 디디디디샤
So here to begin with, as it says, as Shantideva says in his guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, this life of leisures and endowments is extremely difficult to find. And this is something that can be used to our benefit. So we shouldn't, while we have this kind of opportunity, let it go to waste, but instead make use of this precious kind of opportunity. So here we have met with the Dharmas, with the teachings of the Buddha, which is extremely rare. Most of the ages, the eons in the world are dark ages where we don't have the kind of teachings from the Buddha. But we are fortunate enough not only to have met with the teachings of the Buddha, they still remain, and we are able to, having all of the kind of conducive conditions, put ourselves to practice. And so here, while we have this kind of situation of freedom, of all of the opportunities to be able to practice, we should take advantage of this. And this life that we have right now is so extremely rare because of the fact that it took all of these causes coming together for us to be able to take such a rebirth. So we should reflect in this way about how extremely rare and fortunate it is to have such a situation.
Tarmebe yu tagunda tindele majibe chera eni tinde chu sala kebe kamde sungora ta ngarazu jiten dir ko chende ngarazu do ta ke shishu sigorno ine chende de to yin tondo de chide de orno kyo chima penje samlta ine tu yin rumbu shibe chege range maobe kyo sange karene yongju de orba sa ti kyo de kyo sangbu chi toyeda kyo ngembal maje chi tabshi che ure es tangbu dilro ane kibu tendu toba chubalas tene tele cha kyawa chima lada mi tenjoro keba cha chutu bege tene luten chi topne tia tene lada mi kyawa tia ko ngeson le todi kyawa sangbu de te ina chida tungeji rangshin che sonza tele ya tendu tarwa che ledo nyomo be shawando kyurne pumbu dolen che me goch o tende che toba chako ure sam yuring bu samuta tia te rachi bu maiba pande kasura kibi tendu toba chubala se kowe tongele tabe tonda yore do ane simje tamje ge ton trup tongge ge sanje ji ko ba tobe ge tonda truye ma bu yor do o tezu kanga de tumne trup tongge ge tanda ga je kyawa sang bu se lande yor do kibi tendu toba chubala se oh, keden dele pemba maduna chindi anda chuba kara tanda kugab sambu dinde tobe kamdelia tene kyawa chima penje sada mi chetu be ten sambu che tobya te ane te ten de tolia tarba da tamje chimba trubege oda kuma trubege kuso tambu ne gorba suje pa sakwa chiche gore songudwa keden dele pemba maduna chindi anda chuba Mama Bania did the ten sambo, church with Tingy Sange, Gagin Mange, or did the Kogo Sambo to be a cowboy. Tara Kogo Sambo to become the Chusus of Mato and Chene, Joachima Penche. Mondo lami kobada tarba tungele tendo tarba simje tamje ki tube sanje je koban chine ke tobar chago rese o ti sungudo ya dos ma dasada.
So here, while we have this kind of rebirth, we have the ability to practice the precious Dharma. If we are, say, born as an animal, we don't have that kind of ability. Or if we're born in a really remote location or without the proper kinds of faculties, even if we had if we had been born in this world, there are many situations where we aren't able to practice the Dharma. But this time, this life that we have right now is something that is extremely short. When we look at the future, the kind of good and bad, the things that we have to experience in our future lives, this is a much longer amount of time. And so we should use, at the very least, as this verse continues, it says we should use this kind of life for the benefit of beings. This is the kind of opportunity we have right now. And so we, at the very least, should be striving to gain a good, a fortunate rebirth in the future. But recognizing that even if we are to take a rebirth as a human or a god, avoiding the kind of lower realms, it's still within the realms of samsara. It's still in the nature of suffering. So striving to get beyond that, we want to reach a kind of stable, lasting happiness, one in which we don't have to cast off and take up aggregates under the control of karma and the afflictions. So thinking beyond just taking the future rebirth in a good kind of situation, one strives for a stable, lasting happiness. But yet again, looking at other sentient beings, one realizes that it's not good enough to just strive for one's own aim alone, but rather one wants to strive for that state in which one is able to benefit all sentient beings. And so with this kind of recognition that the life we have right now, we can use this for the aims of beings, but if we don't use this to our benefit, use it to our advantage, then how will we have this again in the future? We have to start by having another good rebirth in order to continue to try to accumulate those kinds of causes of liberation and omniscience. And so thinking of the precious opportunity that we have right now and wanting to create all of those sorts of causes, we should think, I'm striving to attain that state in which I am able to truly, fully benefit other sentient beings, striving for that state of Buddhahood, and I will do whatever is necessary in order to get to that place, taking advantage of this life that I have right now.
Oh yeah, te du ta tunda ngaju tende samlo kora la ya. Ani so nema de sange de sara kyo lang sara chin sara te kyo mambo shebo chira trang me bar se nyawa yi da den ru sara kyo kabri sangbu la kabri ngembal la do che yorum bu shebo chine de thoma me ba ne tanda duskal de du za maung bona shebo chin yorum bu ya de yin ba o tende samlo de ngele ko ra do o ti ende te le kyo nga chi se ande ti samlo ko do tanda ngara so samlo na le ya kyo nga chi ye bale yi me che ta me ber same de so kar che ngor se de ngazu pa me de ji ta bo ine sim jen chi pa ta du sa so bo tho de tel te ne pa ta do wa a ti ende tron de ne le de ge sem ge ten chi ben de ba so de ne ko le de sem de wa che ge wa da sem de sem koran de tramo che je do che ge wa de tanda ngazu me le te ne le de ge sem ge ten che to gu ye de ko me so wa me du shi me thong da thong ka ga thong de ge wa da ta le de ge ne sem ge ten che ma tu ten che ben de ba nyam du de ne chen de na do zo no gu no gu chen che sem de sem koran cha ru do ya da sa ko le de le de do ang sum thong ya yo ba phung bu de ten de ko kya chi ma do ge su yo re sa me to do ra chi so bu yang ge sim je karen ti che ti chi ma ka wan do te tong je de ro che pe che ti chi do sam ge or do ti nyam do sem de kyo ma che che chamo che ru yo ba de sam lo ko yo ma ra ngara zo shak je de chi de ti pe sen ya bu do wa sem de yo re de 소하게 면도와 수수 소토고 면도와 뒤내가 가르쳐 하고 도면도 심 참모지 되어라 소부되게 내가 심라바께 땡체 제에 매서 쇼르도 이나 심 참모되는 걸걸지야 수소용고도 어디나시 소보다 심면 저와첸 주요라 simde taru chinje Koran tamuche Koran tense go lungda butinde ya tense rosha gore ya kyoshi lang yore o ti indu ngazu de taru muche soso chitanda mida ware keji jundur mide be tadu tenge mare de yuwa chigi thongma meba ne dunghe de butun ro ri tuna shibu je kor tanda maombala tinde kongen bechi samurda maombala tusu yin bu shibu je soso yebe samluko o tinde chidi tinde samluko ne ni shene o ngone 동엘에 타르와 제고도 삼사 땐도 타르와 제고도 삼사 아니 소소 제부 많이 봐 심전 현도 저 심전 컨디지나 어떤 만도 쳐서 야 어디 저기도 심전 현 심전 탐제 써야 돼 가서 삼리 앞고도 심전 탐제 써야 되고 응원제 산제 드라마 봐 쳐서 심전 탐제가 더 산제 고반 토바 자고서 공네 배전나 요르도 tene mambuji ngarazu lede yordo tene ko tamje sede soso ngone lo chane ngazu da konzu se nyiri soso pama nyede se te janja member te di chacheru cheru tane simjen yimba zamge samlu tone kadu yina ya simjen yimba zamge doshi soya tone karso gore chowa panya da pemba tuge o tene ji samlu le changja changdu ne paru chilya ko tidu nyongge simjeje yimba samje chanene kangese da pemba tuwe samlute kogodo o tejido ne simje tamje se te da drene simje le kewa yene randa drawachene kaze yena ko pen to tumne kyone kyo tu shindo ne sanje ko ba to wachege samsa samlu kachim bude kore yordo o tejikuna amangro cheso.
So, thinking in this way, we should reflect that we have taken up this life right now due to accumulating the particular causes and conditions. We have this sort of human life, but we have in the past taken countless rebirths as good in good states of existence and bad states of existence. There are countless previous lives, and so too, when it comes to our future lives, we are looking at a very long period of time of continuing to take up and experience future lives. So now normally we need to reflect in this way about past and future lives because our normal sense of like what it is to be a human, we think human on the basis of looking at someone's aggregates, looking at someone's body, and that's not the thing that is going to travel into a future life. That body will, while it acts as a support for the mind in this life, it isn't going to continue. Rather, it's that very subtle mental consciousness that is going to continue into future lives. So right now, on the basis of these particular aggregates, we experience human feelings and human discernment and all of those things. But when the appearances of this life fade away, when those set and we continue into our next life, we will then, that extremely subtle mind will take up another rebirth. And so the idea of a human life, we often have this idea of like a solid thing based upon this body, but we need to reflect upon that very subtle mind, that kind of component that is going to continue into our future lives. Like we can think, take the example of like being, having a surgery done or something, wherein one is put to sleep, is anesthetized, such that you don't have those kinds of coarse feelings, but there still is that extremely subtle mind, and that subtle mind has as its basis this very subtle wind, and those will then continue into future lives. So here I'm thinking about the kind of nature of we are impermanent, momentary, changing moment to moment, and we have since beginningless time been taking up rebirths, and we will into the future have to continue to take these rebirths so long as we have not abandoned the root of that. And so thinking in this way, we give rise to the sense of really wanting to get out of this cycle, of wanting to attain a kind of liberation. But we turn and we recognize it's not just me, it's not just myself that is in this kind of situation, but it's all other sentient beings. And now countless Buddhas have come in the past. They have given teachings, but yet still we remain here. We still have to work on training our mind. And this begins, again, by not thinking about us and them, not making those kinds of distinctions, but instead trying to, again, work for all sentient beings based upon seeing just that the fact that they are beings from that very point, not needing to have some sort of special connection with them, but recognizing that all beings, we should abandon harming them and strive to benefit them as much as we are able to, simply due to the fact that they are sentient beings. And in this way, we can come to develop this sort of attitude that we are striving not only to free ourselves from this kind of suffering situation, but all sentient beings, and in that way, strive to benefit all beings.
Oh yeah, the some look at some board is a cogodoa. The logic to the Nayangodoa. Garsere. Make young things. Make bed, Mamba, young Jesus, Legacy, just a year and bush with some Tangodoa. Sanjay, you come to say, Keba Mambo, some Tangiora. There's a make young things, tired and bush some. Look, Jackie, look, Susu, Tit and Dahlia, Shell and Pember to it, Sawa Payata, Dalam to Yegi, Tapshimabu or no. To the top judgeable some of us. Look, Jackie, when I Yendu Dabchina, on a ranch, Gaba Tarbatomna, some message, Nisum Dabtin, Collect Yapuna Cabi, Samsa, Tendresim Shushan, de Ora. Tiring Bushra sometime Madua, some Jay Jachin Bushra sometime Madua. Ranger Dojene, Kebachin, the Collect Yapuna Cap Tarbatoba chicken some Gudua. The Chanju Samba and Kebatame, some do Sosa, Sanje Yokovan Toba chicken some Gudua. Some cook Carsoda. Kebatame, some to the Shivas and Gorne good day, so the Tender Marwa. Simjan Champagne, some Lutane, Champagne, some Chimba, Children Saba, some day Shirabala Soba Chanded, Champagne, some Lucanja de Ordo. O tea in the court in the court chante, so that they cousin go man go some Yomara. Cousin go na dig some Yomarato. Carsoda. Oh, they change you some to do Tambutu, kids with the Mendra, Paruchi, some Locone, and the Carsoda. Simja Tamjang Eli Sanjay, and the Marachi Eli Sanjay was something to do some corridor, and then Yamdu Sanjay was absent said. What is a ganga the co Carsoda? Simjan Law Chan did Keba Kajin Gogi and Akoti, Shen returned to Valley around Lunga Yesu Kanga, the Shendon Bashilunga Saduza, Koti Lo Chimney, Laga the Masuna Mazana there, which Rematochi came to Medua, take around draw Chimbukon and Juguorva, or T in the co, Tizim Goma, go down to do some look at Kogi or Mardo, or Tisunda Casura. Loading on the Kachimbo, Tandang on the social message, change you sound on again, Tobias Medoa, didn't it? Shirash Medoa. The end of the call, you don't go some of that. The young talk one, one Sanjay Koban Toba Chasidu, on one Mount Bana, Simja Tamjak turned to Tunga, Germanga, Roa, Tatunda, Yandakunda Danga, Yana Pendi Pembata. The Lojon to the Nayamudua, should the two do na. And then Shala saw upon but a pember to when you can do in his era. Shala saw upon but stood together driver some to Kanga Yungudoa. Shala pember to us the Tawada and Tom do some to Yungudoa. The Chanju somebody with Samage Yana Simja Domeda Trade, Yana Tawatoya, Tonda Yango, the Cube, Tinde Tobler Medrogaji, Lamji Yomardo. Pember to saw upon but pember to when you know, Divisoda. Tonda Zawada, Champagne, some champagne did it. Something you know, Madu, the Mavis surgery, where to give what in the Casoda. Oh, I do some Lutandusa. That's Sanjay Kovan Tobar shows to the task, Mother Yoyam, something I did the Swakero Chigmund or Ketumandua. Think about the K Windsor. About the Tobar Chagin, something I could tend I'm sending you to never get your mara. The Mina Koya Dil Changin, something. Lotache Kudwa. What a man riches, yeah, did you know?
So here we need to have a very kind of vast way of thinking. When we get into in mind training, it talks about having a long-term kind of view of thinking long-term, because Buddhahood is not something that comes about quickly, but rather takes many countless eons in order to attain that sort of state. We need to have that sort of mental fortitude or this kind of vast aspiration that says, no matter how long it takes, I'm going to strive to attain that state of Buddhahood. So when we have a being like a hearer, a Shravaka, they only have the kind of mental fortitude. They want to attain liberation, enlightenment quickly. So they want to be able to do this within 2 or 3 lives. A solitary realizer has a little bit more fortitude in that they are able to progress over a longer period of time. But when it comes to bodhisattvas, they are committing to benefit others and attain that state in which they are most fully able to benefit others, no matter how long it may take. It's not as though they are sitting there like waiting for something to come about, though. The idea of training over 3 countless eons is something that they do joyfully. It's not like thinking, well, when is this going to be over? But rather, this thought of wishing to benefit others and being able to do that is the question of how long it is going to take to get to enlightenment is irrelevant. That thought of benefiting others is so strong that it doesn't really matter how long it may take. It's said that bodhisattvas actually give rise to that kind of thought of, may everyone else become enlightened and then I follow with that, or may we become enlightened together. So this sort of attitude, when we really have this in a genuine way, it doesn't matter how long it will take, so long as one is striving for the sake of others. Bodhisattvas engage joyfully. They engage with this kind of enthusiasm, with no thought of like, okay, when is this over? But so we need to develop this kind of attitude when we are working on training our minds, that this isn't going to happen immediately. We can't expect a result just right in this one lifetime, but rather have this sort of fortitude that says, no matter how long it takes, I'm going to strive to this state of Buddhahood, a state in which I've developed all good qualities and removed all faults, and thereby have the greatest potential to be able to benefit other sentient beings. And so if we condense all of the kinds of teachings of the Buddha into 2 main points, it is abandoning harming others and working to benefit them. Really, abandoning harm being that trying to get rid of their suffering, that attitude of compassion, and that wish to benefit being the sort of love of wanting other beings to have happiness. And so in this way, all practices are really that bodhisattvas engage in are both directly or indirectly to abandon harming others, to relieve their suffering, and to bring about their happiness. And so this, again, is something where we should think that we are striving long term. We are trying to train our minds in such a way that we're not thinking about just getting something in this life, but rather we should make this kind of decision. I am going to continue to train my mind, no matter how long it takes, in order to get to that kind of state of Buddhahood, not expecting the result to be immediate.
Oh yeah, that's on the Kasoda. Yan de samlo kodo, Kachi de samdo.
거기민도,
Ah,
야, 단다 거기도.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, Dayan de Kasoda. Kashi de samdo, Sanji Koban Tobar Chas. Number the Sanji Koban Tom Nene, Shamben Shibuchi to be in some. Tanda Kage Tanda Chemagu so the Tende Sam Kogi Yorto. Kogi order. What do you do, Kasora? Simje Tamje get troop to get Sanji Koban Tobar Chagi, and Simje Tarshimba troop to get Chagi, some give her mother. Get Tandana called Simje Sawabambo, the Pemba trouble, Tunguch and Tarshimba Shajet, and there's a Jurachagi, some give her mother. Jamaji Topsona Nation, Ben some little with Tibata to Messi, some looks Timardo. Chanju Samba, Champagne, Tunguchi, the Tagila Bangazo. Simje Sama Sanjay, Junior, Gemma, the Garantini, Sanjay, some locodoa. Sakote Shandu to Corala, the Tanganzumasune, Ying the Shoe, the Ras, so a Chedachunity, some low course teach you or no. Or T. Lucas Oda. Simjang it to which I are yet on it, and it touching but truth to get Kyogo say, and they couldn't just say Kovan towards awesome. Thinking Taban and Toya Yabatan bed, ngishin dramba cheche simda che urdo nga nam yu pe chagu ba ABCD ma do mission ge je chema be keba shibu cheche lungba ge pe pombu cheshu chege sa yonde cheshu chege sa samlo khor cho do ning tagwa ne khor ge do danda ko yigi kaga kanga shinge yo maro korean do te te re chibaro ne to ka shin ala sa zo ne o bar mo ya yimba je da tene kar sur da tenda o simje tamje ge tendo sanje yi ko ban to bar cha asam de che do sanje ko ban to je ge ane chu kar su sengi yin sam ko lo sen tab ne sember shu se te de ya.
So some people might think that, well, I'm striving for this state of Buddhahood in order to then be able to help other sentient beings. When I get to Buddhahood, then I'll be helping others. But really, this is not the right way of thinking, because Buddhahood is the culmination of the perfection of being able to help others most fully. But it is, along the way, what we are doing is benefiting and helping others. We are training in that. So along the way to that state of enlightenment, one is making effort constantly at working for the benefit of others. So while Buddhahood is sort of the culmination, the perfection of that development of one's ability to work for the benefit of others, really all along the way, one is striving to help others and is improving in order to eventually sort of culminate, perfect that state. So here, one should make this kind of decision. Again, recognizing that we are still at the point of training, we can still make this kind of decision that we're going to, from the depths of our hearts, strive to get to that point, to be able to develop those qualities all the way to the best of our ability. And so here, it's like when a child maybe is still first learning how to read. They don't know all of the letters yet. They don't know the language, but they can think like, oh, I want to become this really powerful person or be able to do this in the future. They're holding that goal, even though right now they're still learning kind of the language and how to actually read, for example. So like that, we should recognize that although Buddhahood is the perfection of benefiting others, what we are doing is improving and striving in that in all of our actions until that goal. So with that kind of thinking, we should set a good motivation for listening to these teachings, thinking that we are listening to this Dharma in order to be able to attain that state of perfect, complete enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, that didn't share this order. Oh, the Dandanga Sharavasti Chutane Gunaswa, oh, Tenikar Soda. The teacher, Salujang Bento, Papa Salujang Bento Yordo, Sanjay Song Shambe, or Salujang Bento, Tenji Kola, so Song Yordo, Tenjin Jabanjuetone, and then Lam Komaya Tuveta, Tenjin Jabanjuetone, Mishibe Mombase, Tapshichene, Tenjin do Salujang Bento, so Yordo. O di dreba lobe kamashilo zebe dreba shiyordo. O di ngema di karsore warna silya ngazu pendri tinde tanyamdo ngazu tinde di karsore hindi nal kyuriore. O hindi nal kyurde ti lingju chitiyore lingju saurada shung kasukane toso tushenge tuture chitiyoba lingju chitiyore. O di lingju de kolma shena songsoa. O tindi ti kolma sheri, tatso salu jambendo tendi songbo o ti su tanda su tu debre ti she yordo. O ti kol she yinse. Ya, o ti chisuna.
So here then, as for the Dharma that we are going to be discussing today, as requested by Shravasti Abbey, I will be teaching on this the Arya Rice Seedling Sutra as taught by the Buddha. So here, this is mainly teaching dependent origination, how it is that we go about attaining these higher paths through an understanding of dependent origination and removing our obscurations through that. So here, as for the kind of origin of this commentary, there was a time when I translated the commentary by Kamala Shila into Hindi, and then at that time I made a sort of introduction to that. So here we will be going through then this teaching on the Rice Seedling Sutra.
Oh yeah, tan do de sanje sonye de dira. Salu jangbal sine se salu se de dreshingi drag me redwa. Dreshingi jangbat in rejil ba sine. Ane kelon da kelon solucione. Kelon da su tenjin dreben jwa tonga de chu tongo se. Salu jangbat ya che de ngo se che pe ya bu ke yorda. Se ko kyudan kenji ya so sona ne ya shi bu ke yong go ara. O tele sine ne chu de sonra. 그런데 수요 땡진 제발 좀 통화도 쳐통어서 실로그 땡제 저거 계단길로 교단 깰래 때네 계단길로 규정인 주로셔네 고 용다 용로도 삼루다나 제가 메다바다 로 라완도 깨야매버때도 로를 차려야시래 되어도 수요 땡진 제발 좀 통화돼서 설륜 장부다부데 교단 깬지 소디자네 땡제 야부야 깨용 거라 수설륜 장부 땡진 제발 좀 통화돼 血统我是，我这个那最现代个刚个通呢，旁边拉面来结果来说过，拉么老不这用过的是，让大面把多呀了，然后就准备东把多呀了说吧，没大把多呀了说吧，拉么，让大个多，让大个多吧是，他的我用过的过了，我这就刚个血统是，真的结头过的送过了，真的比没大东西东大面来说吧，那就是刚个多头过的是。 제바부 현다지 소 깨와 제메고 바 코라 규진 초스나니 야께 연구데세 어때서 강가게 양답에 따와다 양답에 똑발을 써봐 양답에 나다 레지 탈서 봐 어때서 강가데 통토구레 성구도 수대진 레버 중앙도 쉬었던 수초통화데 산계 통화세 텐데 수초통화데 최남지 내로 토선 통화되게 네 산계 통화세 산계를 써봐 어때서 내로 강가야 통구레세 다 산계에서 뭐 고반 토구래 텐데레 자초우래도 대송구도 다 텔레트네네 장주 선바 잠바다 텐데 조텔레체네 마부숑고라 딘도티레 야 딩오드실람
So here, as far as this sutra of the rice seedling sutra, this takes as a basis, this again in English it's quite clear, the rice seedling, a sprout of a rice. And he said that based upon using this as an example, the Buddha says, monks, he who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, and he who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So that's sort of the basis of this, is that whoever sees dependent origination is able to see the Dharma or realize the Dharma. So it is based upon understanding dependent origination, these teachings on dependent origination, how phenomena arise through causes and conditions, that disciples are able to see the Dharma, realize the Dharma. It's actually through the teaching of dependent origination that one is able to see as well the kind of various qualities of impermanence and suffering, selflessness and emptiness and so forth, by way of understanding dependent origination in terms of how it is that samsara comes into effect and how it is that then one is able to reverse samsara as well. This, again, is by this understanding of dependent origination, this sort of arising due to causes and conditions and so forth, as well as the kind of other things that are linked with that, including things like the Eightfold Noble Path that also are sort of linked to this teaching of dependent origination. So again, the basic beginning of this sutra is that the Buddha teaches that says, monks, whoever sees dependent origination sees the Dharma. And based upon that, seeing the Dharma, understanding that in this way, he says, he who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So based upon having an understanding of the Dharma that the Buddha taught, one can also have a realization of the particular qualities of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, tindu tatunda. Tende de pe nang basanje belulia, tende de pe keshibusigo no. Tenjin debari joante. So tenjin debari joan, Judan kela tenjin debari joane. Oh, Juan Hindu sani medaba ti trup to yore, keshi medaba. Ne rawando obu koran debu koran rawando to truba meba de ti trup to yore no. Ne koran Judan ken sama la tene. sheche nezu koran nezu karimba de to to guyore gyudan kenle tene sansune ke masana meke wa tege ne jigre cheba bol so baro shenda jige yanko ke na ke ku ye samna ke hada ti ma ke na samna ma ke ko ya de shenda jige on che ke yo mardo ne sa chu lu chu shi so ba ya sa ya bu chi gyujin sansune tondo ya bu ke yongura ti mena tondo ke mardo ta tiene salu jambe de go sombanavshi gutile nge ke go samsan samlo ke ko mares yo ame base kulung yo ame ne se de tigre sungorda jebu to je ngati ke so samsa tinde samlo yo mares o tinde je sungdo asa kyujin sansona kora jebu kari na te de tembe kyujin sansona ko ke gorda sa tenjin debre jo ante namba sanje ba meta donge tong dang mele so ba tubji ki ye tu to yore shen meshipe mongbala soba taadun zimbala soba gyudan tribunal lokbar tokbala soba lokbar kanga lokdo kanga de te jom to gyore ti peke sembure de ordo oya o ti sonza de che songa ba tente tebe ko sanjele tente tebe ko ne teberwa sanjele tente sumbe ko ne tebere tente tebe se shiwa o tinale songudwa kanshi sikshi songba ye kenda tembala name Kyawa tenjin drebar chung sikshi tongpa te lan deyo se. Kanshi sikshi songpa yi kenda tongpa lana me se. Tendre te kempa te kempa lana me ba. Tendre tongpa te tongpa lana me ba se. Tendre si te kyudan kenle tene keba re se senge sangma tendre mawa sege wa ma re. Kyudan kenle tene kedan kilo kande re. Ten gyurwa chene drebulun gyurwa kari yongu re kande shene trupkuwa re. Te yakbo je shengen tele songkuwa ardo. Tenjin rebaran juwa yinpe kyusenki rangwa ne trube tongbare. Tenjin rebaran juwa kyusenki kechi len gyurwa re. Rwa, ni nga ranzi kowa bada jine tenjin rebaran leda nyumu bamga tenjin rebaran juwa sonzane tungya re. Rangwa tu truba yungu ma re samsa. O tuzu kanga, lokto kanga seya de te sege re. Ene to kuya chi chamba da tsawa seya dawa. Rwa, tabki cha tuzu yina ya tenjin rebaran juwa sambala tene ya tesu trup tsugu yuwaari, te sonza tenri te peke chenpo re so, tenri sungpe chane, tenpa sanje chum tende, ane tenpa lana meba da, rawa tenri kempa de, kempa lana meba, tenri sungdwa, kanshi sikshi sungpa ye, kenda tenpa lana me, kyawa tenjin rebra jo, sikshi tongpa te lan de so, kyawa sanje chum tende, chini chu tamje rawa, duje ki chu tamje da, chu kari hina, sama tamje, tenjin rebra jo ware, rangi kyudan kenla, tenje tedan drene ane ko kengechire ko rangwa chen tanya kego mare o tena shi cho tamje rangi dakshi dan chashe la tenje drene tele tene lo fa ta ne lo yidu yunga te samriya yoba shaku yorese o tende sungdo te chane ane kembala na meba da karse kanshi seji sungba yi kenda tembala na mes kembala na meba tende kemba de kembala na meba roa tendre tembe lana mba ta tendre tongba de nyamdo yongo re tendre da tongba tenjen debren jwa sonza rawando chene troba shiwa mare se tongba de tendre tongba tendre pe ta ye bo sam ta shinge chene ta ye bo yongo ro o tendre chane songo ma do kyuden gele ne keba re se je samal se yo ma do kende tembe lana me kawa tenjen debren ju se shi tongba te lan dos jiden kuba de so karesna jiden kuba chingi ba te so marik de sungudwa jiden gi kuba kya ganga ni so sama tamje jwa de karchen junggo resna chindele na da kyo chima na da tengi kedu karji na ro konse kende mun ka de se do jiden kuba chingi ba te so marik ba shije ne zu je samlu tamashine go ara sende chi 동에다 지 근데 망부시 삼루 담에시 삼루 농두다 가서 준줄 서나 시대 로 되주데 대완되나 고 삼루 담다데 내가 제다한테 지도자 동해야 규텔은 건 바기고 그래서 로 동해 돈데 여야데 동해 규디사 되거 고 내가 두고 삼고데 동해 규디사 되거라 어디서로시 그 비된 그바 진이 바테서 아마릭 데스 땡아라도 배지 첸딜립사 삼르tonda 소소 삼르tonda 계급이 삼르tonda 본부적 삼르tonda 대화 이내지 조긴 쓰고 때 이내고 삼단당원에 zam불이 거랑 매버서 서로 삼단도 와 센텔 샤샤나 쓰고다 다 다르고 탐지 전부 두시 줄라때 들리잖아 지대 그바 정이 바태서 말이데 간시 통해 된도 바텐지 들어가 좋았어 땡진 대버는 좋아 대화 영에 주디 가래 좋아 주 가래 전에 대화 연구도 동해 영에 주디 가르쳐 연구도 티 가르쳐 티디 하고 하전에 티 공원에 야구제 하고서는 네 동해 영에 주디 파셀 대화 영에 주디 줘보기로 와 센델이나다 땡기 티도 이나다 티 메시베 왕게네 저기 어마르도 어디 손자 가서래 지대 그바진이 버테서 아마리 간시 통에 된도 와 땡진 레버는 좀 왔어서 전에 땡데되게 남샤디 아고지 신서나 주단 캔을 때네 디두기 주단 캔도 야고지 신서나 최간다가 자단이 이도와다 매와가 다다 신세도 강가 뭐 주단데 가래 랑게 차셰 코라 마인게 닥시럽실 땡신 대단 전에 아니 로요왕게 파다네 티치지르 다스 파다 대참을 샤바데 신소나 아니 나 삼사 나 라와로 제 시버지 예배 삼을데 매버샤도 자그라 가라서 소소세된 그나가다 가시 제가 좀 남주 삼대 전에 나스도 라와로 시버지 예 삼기도 다티 마르다세 속보다 셈다 소라다 사다 추다 메다 롱다 남가다 엔더니 저절 대신 일게요라 사시도 대가라주 속보나 타고 차들 사유 중하러 와 추디 차다 저저 사들 와 사슈 저거라도 사다 추다 메다 롱다 우당에 대셔서 고고도 남가서 동산 고고도 거기날 동바고 우도서 거로 근데 전에 치료 우고 그래 시비전 대기도 등간서 초전에 하먹어 세계레면도 그 삼로 당겨 말와 그 다스고 소승한가랑 그 저대에서 마도 치료기 하와이나 가리나 저주 때가 매배소리 삼기도 되되요 말도 자꾸 감주 되버라 때네 소보다 셈다 초라다 두실라 소바트 줄 때네 아니 다세 단주도 다 대샤 다 나기도 다 대본도 근데 딱이오다 대sam라 다세데 샤고도마도 다 제가 돈이 피네니 시요 말도 라오에 다데 뚜뚜디 야보지 신나 최 가래 옛날 집으로 다 옛날 소보도 셈다 소화던 두시도 넘버 쉐버요래 감주요래 저는 되발라 때네 아니 고저로 제 셈다 류데 마스노 트시레 셰트루레 단주도 가부도 기부도 나기도 사기도 지 가래네 샤고도 대sam라 샤고도 마도 다 나생게 가봐였으니 셴다 라에게요 말해 풍부티 나로네 라요 말에 셴다실래요 말와 진짜 라왕도 매바세 디마쇼네 용거도 자 텐데들라 담마쇼네 용거래 어디에도 가서라 간시 통해 된다 어때지 지된 그바진이 버텨서 말에 간시 통해 된다 어때지 레버는 좀 왔어 자 텐데데 베케션 버려 된다 어야 어디지 셔나 쇼르관이 되게 된다 롭실람들에
Yeah. So here then, dependent origination is considered extremely important as a teaching. Through dependent origination, we can establish that things are impermanent, that they depend upon various causes and conditions, and they can establish that we don't have this kind of autonomous existence in the way that things appear to us. Rather, it's based upon the kind of aggregation of causes and conditions that things come about. So here we will see later in the text how this refutes the idea of some kind of a creator God or things needing to be propelled by some sort of motivation. It's not as though the sprout comes into existence because of thinking, oh, I want to come into existence, for example. So here, this we will get into it in the sutra, but it is establishing that once, if you have all of the causes and conditions present, then something will come into being. But one can't assert that there's some sort of like things being moved by intention or something like that. So it is through establishing, and this can establish all four of these, impermanence, suffering, selflessness, and emptiness can be established through a proper understanding of dependent origination. It's also able to remove all of the kind of wrong conceptions that we might have and establish a proper kind of understanding. So here, as it says in the beginning of Je-Lama Tsongkhapa's In Praise of Dependent Origination, he praises the Buddha, saying, I bow down to the unsurpassable teacher and sage, the one who sees and knows dependent arising, the king of reasons, and explains it just as he sees it. So here, and later in the text, Tsongkhapa is praising the Buddha for his teaching on dependent origination, saying that, this is the unsurpassed kind of teaching. This is the unsurpassed knowledge. The knowledge of dependent origination is supreme among wisdoms. And so when we begin to understand the nature of that, we see that it's not just an understanding of things being dependent upon causes and conditions. That's sort of a more coarse level of understanding, but also that all things are empty of this kind of autonomous existence. And again, because we are under the control of such causes and conditions, we are in this kind of suffering situation. So again, this reasoning of dependent origination can establish all of these various points. So when we look at all of the kind of elements of the method side as well of the path, these can also be established through dependent origination. We can see how it is that love and compassion, for example, are efficacious because of that understanding of causality. So here, whatever it is that comes about due to causes and conditions. But not only that, things are dependently originated in the sense that they are dependent upon their various parts. They're dependent upon their basis of designation. And so because things are dependently originated, they are therefore empty of any kind of intrinsic existence. Again, this is not an understanding of dependent origination that is solely causality, but it goes beyond that. And this continues then into the second verse, where it says, ignorance is the root of all the manifold misery in the world. So he teaches dependent arising, the seeing of which reverses it. So the source of all of our various problems, both in this life and in our future lives, we can see how this kind of happens with respect to our ignorance. Due to ignorance, we create all of our problems. Our lack of understanding is what brings about all of the various sufferings that we experience. Like Shantideva has said to us, it is the case that we think we are getting our happiness. What we are running after is what we think is happiness, but we're actually running toward our own suffering. We see this with ourself as an individual, with states, with groups, with parties, all of these kinds of things. We think, oh, I'm going to get some happiness, but we're actually, running toward the causes of our suffering or creating the causes of our suffering. So if we understand this well, if we understand the kind of ignorance that is the foundation that leads to our suffering, and have a proper understanding of the presentation of dependent origination, we can see that all of the various things that exist, friend, enemy, good, bad, all of these things, we can see that they don't have some kind of existence from their own side, but rather are merely designated by mind. And so too, when it comes to the person, this idea of self or this sense of I, we have this idea of I as an autonomous kind of a being, as though we were set up from our own side, but we don't actually exist in that way. When we look at the person designated on these five aggregates or on the basis of these six elements, we can see that there's earth and water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. And on the basis of that, we designate a person. We can talk about a person. But when we look for, well, where is that actual person? We can't point to anything. We can't identify that actual, the person that as it exists in our mind. We can't, and two, when we look through all of the various aggregates, find one of those that is somehow existent in the way that it appears to us. And so all of these, the way in which this eye appears to us, we can have a sense that it exists from its own side, but it doesn't actually exist. And it is through the understanding, the proper kind of understanding of dependent origination, that we are able to undo this kind of ignorance. And we will obviously get into this more as we go on. So this understanding of dependent origination is extremely important. 거기민두. Padiksha.
Oh, Geshe-la is muted, it seems.
No,
Oh yeah, oh dusha. Oh yeah. 다단다가 저 텐제디로와. 텐제 데버리 좋아하듯이 쉐두사. 동바데 냠도 레병 거어도. 장원의 주베 동바서 레거래. 아니 치 텐제시 치 내주기 지대 텐제 데버리 좋아 컨디션 거래서. 나게 텐제시 강사도 과학코드사 안에 텐제 양라 종이 줘서 컨디션 거래서. 대고 쉐거도. 뒤인도장고 나다 치 텐제도 쉐벌 때네 아니 직대지 가서래 제바부 셴지기 제바 많이 받아 아니 동반이데 저데 나게 텐제 과거에 된 독발에서 동바디 쉐기도 라원에 주베 동반이 쉐데 쉐기도 어디인데 동반이데 백개신 버려서 지단 고 동반이데 삼르타에 삼르타 마시네 고 냥가에 지기와라 동반이를 따ኘ나 동반이를 따다데 야부 마쇼이나 그네야 동반이를 따ኘ나 시럽치나 풍화져서 근데 동반이를 따ኘ나 시럽치나 풍화져 지다 줄라 송이다 릉아니 바주바시도 독주디 생계이나 야부지 심마도나 아니 소소게 내가 냐가 요르도 어디나시 ngala soba tinde yang shen lian ne ba che tinde ngala soba tinde san ne chi che yor do tu ge ne tinde yor o to ya wo ma chune pa ma ne so ne yang ge yor do o je shen je ko nyang ga chen bu re se ka re se tong ba ni se de tong ba re se ka ge me re sam ne le jum de me re ta me re sa ka ya me re sam na ani che da lo do ke wa da te ko le se ma re ne ka yo ma re sam ne 냥가 전부요래. 네 띠빠사 그래도 마부사 그래도 개와서 개밖에 매삼지. 저 동반년을 따년에 실어 주나 보아줘. 지다 줄을 손이다 릉아니 맞춰 봐셔서. 나한테 초치네나 동반이 있어야 돼. 아버지 마셔놔야 고 동반이 있어야 돼. 간대지나 좀 태좀 싸와야나야. 아니 시버르브르 제버는 줘서. 태좀 사와좀 얘기야 시버르브르 제반 줘 시게반에 오다. 동반에서 다서 소소로 남경한저 다데 그 라와 두베 여베 시샤제 섬을 당그라. 다 소소데 간대지가 섬네 섬네 숙천부지에데 나데 간대진도 섬 소소 나 여다들 섬로 따네. 태좀데 사는 가서데 간대지나 섬파 태좀 사와 좀 얘기야 시버르브르 제반 줘서. 시바 코아데 베 차운루도 지요레세 강바르지만에 매 루루샤야 냐가 요레스 가르스는 코아코야게 주 짜와들이야 네고요도 나세 나데 시부지 나스부터 나데 ngo네데 네지 ngo네데 간데시 요레세 삼을탄데 아고 코에 짜와들이야 구저자거도 꾸마마이 꾸마르시네 ngo마 심시 하마고 테듯이 코멘도 삼나 벌써된 다른 연구로도 밑에 다하고 살을 삼지 어디내 신인소로 저 동반이데 배 배에 전부 야 삼로 다 마시는 년가 전부 인송도 와 어디지라나
So, when explaining dependent origination, then it is closely linked with this idea of emptiness. Emptiness meaning that there is no kind of intrinsic existence, no autonomous existence from the side of the object. So, here in this explanation of dependent origination in the sutra, it will go through looking at the way in which our external environment is dependently originated, as well as the kind of inner dependent origination. So, this gets into negating the idea of there being some kind of other creator that brings things about, but rather this understanding of dependent origination means that there couldn't be such a creator. So here, emptiness refutes this kind of existence from its own side, existence as though it were non-contingent or non-dependent. But this is something where one shouldn't fall into a kind of misunderstanding. If you don't understand emptiness properly, someone might think that, oh, well, nothing whatsoever exists. And that kind of nihilistic view can come about. So here, as Nagarjuna has said, if someone of little wisdom sort of encounters emptiness, it can bring ruin for them in the way that like holding a poisonous snake can lead you to get bitten. So there is a kind of danger of teaching emptiness, of understanding emptiness, misunderstanding emptiness, as having this idea that there's no cause and effect, there's no karma, there's no virtuous or non-virtuous actions. And in that way, if someone who doesn't have a proper understanding, they can fall into that kind of nihilistic extreme. It can be like being bitten by a poisonous snake. So on the one hand, there's a sort of great danger in teaching emptiness to those who are not able to properly understand. But on the other hand, we have quotations from Aryadeva's 400 verses where he explains that even by having just a little bit of doubt, if we start to doubt the way that things are, this can begin to dismantle samsara completely. If we have this normal idea of I and that sense of I and grasping to that I, if we are able to begin to just have a little bit of doubt about the way that that exists and see that that root of samsara, if we can begin to destabilize that in some kind of a way, that's actually the beginning of being able to tear samsara down, take it apart completely. So here we should have this kind of understanding that yes, emptiness can be a very profound and dangerous almost teaching in some ways, but also it's powerful in the sense that even just a little bit of understanding can begin to really dismantle that fundamental ignorance.
Oh yeah. Oh, in the case, that don't ban you talk about it, or talk about it. And this Sanjay Koban, the part of Judea and Judea and David, someone comes a day, don't ban you talk about it, and drop to with race on Yara. Oh, Karasana, Yomon Betty, but don't ban you combalate and a pound over, Meshibe Mombati, don't ban you combalate and a pound over Yorda. Oh, this uncle, they pay simple essay. That the pain chamber in Bendo, the longy tongue door teach law now matter some. Oh, then cure and butchers in Lendorjas. Donald Carson dosana. Jambe Chanju Semba Top Keba, Tabla Keba, the Travas, the Tombani talk with syrup than Mendembe, Chanju Semba Tezuka Esigora, Keba Kashachi, and Sunam da she gets all and Baba in Ayas and Guiara. Jambe Chanju Semba Top Keba than Travis. Keba Jadon, Tomaris, Paru to Chimbatula, Chimba to Saba, some day Shirabla Soba Comba Yanaya, Tombani Mado Wache, Chanju with Semke, Chimba to Saba, some day La Soba Tezolia, Keba Jada, Don Tendril and Bezucheba Yanaya Sungura. Oh, the niggas are Shujinambra, Paru to Chimbatula, Cheba, Sunam Toba, Tele Esugura, and Gangi Shogi Nambrandi, Gangi Shogi Nambrandi, Tezum Dachete, Nyambandi, Sunam Che Mando, Gay Sudua, Dongbani Chanju Semba, Dongbani, the Tezum Dachet, Kandajina, some Tameba said, the Dongbani said, the Kandajina, some Tezum Dachet, Pa, Nyamba something, and the Sunam Sigres, Tile Chanju Dongbani Madoge, Chanju Semba Tezuge, Lamla Loba Letene, Sunam Mabu Chachigres on Yara. And the Tezo Mabase con Yambada, Dashi Merce, and it Tombani Yambada, Shebada, Yigin Jua La Soba, tezo pe penyu chenpo yin songudwa. Choki namdran di tezum da che de nyenpa de sunam che mangdo ke na se tezum meba la nyen tashi me sunam mabutu gure se. Ane yigin driwa da long baba da cheba da nyenpa la sokba tezo sunam che meba saga yu songudwa. Karesne kwa koya ke tsawa da kanga chakdan ke ke tsawa kanga de dangjin ki chiwara. Nga samsa nga rawa, ane ngaye samsa, ane nganso samsa, tiki tsawa chigiwara. Sa ti tsawa dili kujo kyagiwara, ti baris noris sungiwara. Ti indi penyo chenpu yungiwara. Chakdan nyamon doya ke shi tsugiwara. Mishibe mongba doya ke shi tsugiwara. Ane chamba da tsawa la soba chakdan mene tezo kanga peya ke shi tsugiwara. Ti sonza ko penyo chenpu de sungido. Some day they catch it. Ramjos, Tian Shan, Penny Songoda. And dear Sanjay Jumden de Songoda. Chu Kanga, Chu Kanga said, Niga called Jagali Chu Kanga says to what? Tele Kocho, Jamzule, Tai Jamzule Kocho, Kanga said, Ming Kashashan. Tai Jamzu, Shema Shibuja, Shema Mambu, Tai Chu Kanga said, yeah. Jime Chang Chingi Yoba, Jinigi Chang Dan Yambin Jigden Kamsera. Jime Chang Dan Yambin Jigden Kamsera, that said Changa Jai Mabersera. Tendelia, ne Sanjay Nambi Dundura, Kusu Tendo, Rambuchin not doing it, Rambuchin Jigden, what's Ashishu to the better Chebashune, Durba than Chebala Sobatendation, Sunam Kazaki. That's same Meba Chigresura. Same message, Teleja, Lagmasura, and the Tongbaniles of art and recombined the Penisha in Sungudwa. Kangelung Chemania Jira, Kangelung Tenidu, Kangelung Chemache, Chemati Nig Tranda Nyambe, Jigden Camunasura, Kedagi Chemar Juba, Mama Vase, and you don't know Chema Mama Chematezo. Kange longe chema kang chingi ba longya tingi do jurde ese tadi do mangbusuji chema jurba de mawa yenam se da ti mangboro ramjo jisu ba chomden de ne chema jurba tingi ja mangna te da ge chema jurba te tangda nyambyang dab chi da do ka se chomden de je ka se ba ramjo chola ko se Choji Kondo Chubar Chaos, Kangelung, singing by Tingy, Jigdengi, Keba Peme, Tajigdengi come, Jimmy Tranda, Jiden Cambria, Rambuchin Nadungini, Giboteda, Kansat and the Sheba Shebina, Payan Kande, good ass, good at Sheba Pena. Giba the permitted Sunam Temeba Saga, One Mambures, Sangelia Shudoa, Nesanje Makazane, or Tele Janson Gora. Ne kanshi chogi namra tana chikshibé chiksha chogi namra tana tongbani tonbe sholga chigi chikde tonda ma tobada shebala sowa tazu penye chigre songora sheba tsam songde serwa shenda la ya tena se shenla tembada rangi nyambada sunam che mawa kedo sheda ti sunam chigre sore ngaran jene cha chumbiru jene Rambuchin Nadis da Komar Shibin Zambulin de Galia, Kyo Tamjel, Nobu Rambuchin, so Cheva Shibuchena, Sunam Shibusagrido. Tete Sunam the Sagrida in a teleja, Tongbani Tembada, Chebada, Nyambada, or Tendation Pensia, yes, or so Karas and Ting Yamobata, Mishibe Mombata, Tapta, Shirab Nigan, Mitin Shotosulia, never knew or no, news of Shishu or no. O take pensia resudo. Oh, didn't get a didn't matter. Do a liulaja. Only try to go and say, some maybe less about or Pada Malas or whatever. Not so much I want to do about Mimabusene. Or today less about Inaya. Don't buy you a turbage, somebody convincing. Did some led the summit you lay him by a name Mamma took so that. Jimmy about the young like Ketokumara Songuara, or Tina she make a chula soba, to put subshin but to the Tantazoya, Saba Yinaya, don't buy you some Lutana, tikpa mambu ta do yare ra tongba samlada nganzu namju shakba chi de ko tongbe ngando sha se tongba ni kom de shakba chi de ti chembure de yare chitane ko wata de ya mangda sti chi la ta de so tu du lamna de sik chima chi shi ko mara oh yeah.
So here, then, in dependence upon realizing emptiness, it is for these kinds of beings who have had this realization of emptiness that all of samsara and nirvana is actually established within that understanding of emptiness. And so it is emptiness alone that is able to remove all of this kind of lack of knowledge, this nescience that we have, and it is able to develop our wisdom fully. So here, just to give a kind of brief summary of what Geshe-la has been saying, there is a quotation from a sutra in which it explains here, talking about the vast kind of benefits of realizing emptiness, that someone who is lacking in skill and means, and here this means someone who is lacking a realization of emptiness, can habituate to, can develop the practice of the 6 perfections over hundreds of eons, over thousands of eons, and the kind of merit that they would accumulate would be vast, would be almost immeasurable. But whoever, in contrast to that, whoever listens with even a little bit of doubt to the teachings on emptiness, if they have this thought of like, well, what is selflessness? What is emptiness? Their merit would be greater still than those other beings. So what need to speak of someone who would be listening with the kind of lack of doubt, with certainty in what they are hearing? So here, this kind of understanding of the sort of benefits and the power of emptiness, this really gets at, it is so powerful because of the fact that emptiness gets at the root of samsara. All of our suffering comes from this grasping at an I, and the attachment and the hatred and all of the various afflictions that arise from it. That is the root of all of the kind of suffering, all of the misfortune that we experience. And so in the basis, by creating that kind of realization of emptiness, that understanding of emptiness, we are getting at the very root of all of our various sufferings. It is the root too of how we are able to develop genuine love and compassion. So there are extremely great benefits to understanding emptiness. So here there's another sutra quotation, I believe it might be from the Vajra Cutter Sutra, wherein again it's explaining that the kind of merit that one would create, say if you were to take the number of grains of sand in the Ganges, or we could say the ocean. We're just talking about some sort of vast body of water. And imagine world systems as vast as those grains of sand. And imagine offering to the Buddhas in all of those world systems, all of the 7 royal emblems, all of those kinds of precious things. Imagine the kind of merit that would be created from that. But if one is to understand, even if they are to, say, repeat the meaning of one verse, one 4-line verse of the teachings on emptiness, such merit would be greater than such a kind of an offering. So we don't have to think of it exactly the same. We could imagine offering to all of the sort of precious beings even within this world and the kind of vast amount of merit that would be created. Well, just listening to one 4-line verse on the meaning of emptiness, or hearing that, explaining it to someone else, that kind of merit is extensively more vast. And so here, this is the kind of, we should recognize that our understanding, our study of emptiness is something that is incredibly powerful, incredibly precious. And if we are thinking about the other sorts of benefits, it's as well explained that those kinds of negative actions that we have committed in the past, actually within the context of the 5 negativities of immediate retribution, as they are normally called. We could think of the example of Angulimala killing all of these people, but through his realization of emptiness, he was able to purify those kinds of negativities. So actually the Buddha has said, I speak of these 5 negativities of immediate retribution only in the context of not understanding emptiness, because this understanding of emptiness is so extremely powerful in terms of being able to accumulate merit and purify those extreme kind of negativities that we may have created.
Oh yeah, that day do so called Dongbani Corte, Jisha Huyo or the Tinema. Oh, Parsore. Da tenjin rebra juanga tene tongba nyedu shese. Uma tsawa shirabla sobo sangme kapso. Di mambu sungudwa. Mashi uwo ne ma yungura. Uwo ne yungura. Pena nga diri sheshe kasore. Tsawa shirabla chochirabshine. Kange tenjin rebra juanga gakwa meba ke meba cheba meba ta meba wa meba ndro meba tadete meten. Truba nishi shidenba, soba sanje manamji, tambadalo chasa lo se, sawa shirabta, ane shenda ngobulutu shumambu namlia, sanje chumden delia, tendre sungbe kone toba tu yore. Shenda yende mambu yore, te chane to shora, timar tongba nyi, tenda kotum genge, tenjin repari junga sungba te, ane tagita andro so, te sungba chane tamba de tamba lana meba rese. Ti kemba de kemba lana meba rese te kutuwa. O tende shuma muka ste hore. O de karsore. Ne kange tenjin reban jung gakwa meba ke meba. Tenjin reban jung sonza ne kewa rangwene truba yo amare. Gakwa rangwene truba yo amare. Kenga nische gakwa meba ke meba sigdwa. O de nyamba dan pewa sigdwa. Nyambela tete ya pen ya ke ondu pewa sigora. Nyamdudun jingdudun nyamba sigora. 펜드빌라야 뭐보 남게 배와단 드발을 때네 아니 겨와단 가바니 소라 자고 떼진 대발 좋아서자 교단 깨를 때니 끼기 위해서 교단 깨를 때니 깨봐서자 랑원에 깨봐서 요 말해 교진 상선에 코라 나오면 봐고 주도라 교진 마찬에 두베게 요 말도 코라 랑원에 좋던 연구에는 코라 나라주르지네 신가르셨다네 요공공부르지 야게 오고도네 코란 야타야 베서라지 소르거도와 코란 야트니 야타야 베서라 코란 타야게 요마도 교단께 간거 차선에 그 라마바 야게기 와도 어찌인데 그 텐지 대번 간거 텐지 대번 좀 각과 매바 깨매바 각과 세대 뭐땅 각과도 깨와 계셔야 그말 각과 매바 깨매서 교단께 대번시 봐 소원에 내려된 가서나 드부지께 온 거라 드부지께네야 각바 되는 드부지께 와요 거라 야는 드부지 땅부께 는 각바 온 거도 어단들은 각바다 깨와 매방 가매바스 마스마셰 그 랑윈에 트바 술이야 갱가다 저 구름 내바시에 고요 말아 다든다 응고 코라게 뭐 냠바다 배워를 때네 갱가 니스셔라 각바 매바 깨매바 체바 매바 땅 매바세 각바 매바 깨매버와 너더니 니바들야니 가래 체바 매바 땅 매버와 대가르시고르스나 둘레 뜨듯이고라 뒤따도 내배차네 뒤 내배차네다 어 거기 가봐 체바 매바 땅 매바 균 체바시고라 균 체바다 매도아 가거든 가봐면 체바매바 땅매바 뒤따도 된게 단단히 이마 따버리시 대샤서 인지내려 주세요도 다 내바들야 내바랑원에 주바요 말에 로 체바데 균체로와 대랑원에 주바요 말에 어딘들 잘도 어디나 시가를 둘레뜨네 로니 시라 강게 땡기는 가봐면 체바매바 땅매 와매바 로매바 이러와 위를 뜨던 조언이시구나. 유진의 지도 와서 반로하세요. 근데 자이거도 수용하자. 유진의 실력서 지진로세라. 조언이 강게ten지라 좀 가봐면 이제 샤바다 와면 다대되면 되지 매세. 아니 고라게 가서래. 달라뜨서 오라 달라뜨서 로바데 찍다 타데세 찍스도 로바 매 찍간게네 찍으러와 로바 주네 니스가 타데스라 찍다 타데니스 달라뜨서 로바 예바다 매네 찍간게 pom바시 찍으라 pom바다 가와서네 니르와 어저 찍다 타데니스 다던다 가르쳐버서나 텐전 레버 좋아인데 네 깨와다 가바다 dro와다 호와다 dro와 아니 가서 내바다 체바다 균체발 소바 그래서 가야 랑원에 주베요 말해서 어떤 될 시간인데 요도 야 박배 냠샤의 시기 Simula Tote, or Tikaya, your mother, Sindichan and Digora, Kangatenji, Gawam, Shabama, one member. Tade to Metajime, Trevanya Shitan Bars, Trevanya Warashi Shiva, young Ellen Davatil Sungora, Trevanya Shitamba. So we Sanje Manam Jetamba de la Shasa Lose, Sanje Chum Den Mawanam Jetamba Mamboyore, Jide Kamdela, Dumba Chuma Mamboyore, Chuma Namje, Tambam Chodo Cuba to the Esungora. Then Jason Bechane, then she Deborah in the and the Rangonia Tomba de Es or Tison Bechane, Dumbalanimas. Tamba de la Shasa, or did you do this alumni?
So here, this kind of explanation of emptiness, we will get into it more below, but often we see these, like in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses or root verses on emptiness, wisdom, where he talks about anything's dependent arising is explained as emptiness, looking at this intimate connection between the teaching of dependent origination and the teaching of emptiness. And we see that the Buddha, many, like the Jelamatsongkhapa, as well as Nagarjuna, praise the Buddha in particular for his teaching on dependent origination, which eliminates any kind of idea that things exist from their own side, that they have a sort of autonomous or existence that is not contingent or dependent upon other things. So here in Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise, the praise, the homage that he offers to the Buddha says, I bow down to the most holy of teachers, the completely accomplished Buddha, who teaches the peace that pacifies all elaboration, that whatever dependently arises has no cessation, no arising, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no unity, no plurality. And so here, praising the Buddha for teaching in this way, that things are not arisen by means of some kind of intrinsic nature, that they are not established, they are not arisen from their own side or ceased from their own side, but rather things come about due to causes and condition. We see this with a sort of increase of things and their decrease. They don't do so from their own power or from their own side, but rather it is the case that they are dependent upon the accumulation, the aggregation of various causes and conditions to come about. If it were the case that, say, something like a tree were able to be were able to arise from its own side, it wouldn't have to depend upon a seed or a sprout or any of that. It would just come into being, or it would have to be in being as a fully blown tree. And so here, when it comes to the kind of understanding that the Buddha has put forth, it is saying that there is no sort of cessation or arising, intrinsic cessation without dependence on some kind of causes and conditions. And so when it comes then to no annihilation and no permanence, this is looking at the way that things are not they don't cease, their continuum is not cut in a kind of intrinsic way, nor do they abide or remain in a way that is stable and intrinsic, not dependent upon other things. And so then sort of looking at this in terms of time, again, there's no coming, no going, nothing that comes about due to its own sort of force of existence, and nothing that goes away due to its own autonomous existence. And so it is dependent upon again, various causes and conditions coming together that we can talk about coming and going, but there is no such intrinsic coming or intrinsic going. And so too, there's no unity or no plurality in the way that we talk about things like a self or others or any kind of phenomena. They're either one thing or they are multiple, they are plural or different, like a pot and a pillar. So too, things do not have that kind of intrinsic specific existence as a singular thing or as separate or different things. So here, when Nagarjuna is praising the Buddha, the completely accomplished Buddha, the most holy of teachers, who teaches the peace that pacifies all elaboration, one could also say that all of these things, no cessation, no arising, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no unity, no plurality, this is to the perspective of an Arya's meditative equipoise. And while there are kind of many teachers, the Buddha is the most holy of teachers, specifically for this particular teaching.
Oh yeah, do so. Oh, that. I can do the one. Moya tatini karsode. Tongbani sheku yordo, Tame basera, Tongbani sera. Tatili chidan tara mambu yordo. Tongbani seduzanko shedan trupda susuwe. Tongbadili kashe ragbashe, kashe tili travashe, kashe tili travashe. O tindecheni shedan mambu yordo. Pinangaranzo Tongbu Sanje Chumde den Jiden Kamliha. Pebin Duzan Tingundo Tangshenbala Soba Kundu Tata Nobo Tatu Samatam Rangandu Truba Yus, Rangune Truba Yogures Goda Tade Rangune Rode, Rangune Yoga Masako Tade Tagware, Tade Tagba Garanju Sobudi Midabare, Sobudi Midabare, Natsani Mebsar, Tina Loli Tayore, Tade Tagbare Segura Tagbare. Any chibu, Koran chibu, Pumbunga, ten and Delwa, and Rishi the Kachakoma, Koran chibu, Netugure, Rawan Koran chibu Netugure. Pumbule loss of Tandanga, Sobodan, Semdan, Soroda, Dushi Yorba, Tele loss of Tayores, Nasa, Chiores, Titakbares, Nimane, your Tanda, your Maubana, do this order. Maubana Kawashima to dry yours, in a tide Tabachi yours, Nata Sigora, Tas the Nanga, Narazanga, Sambuda, or the Tagbatan, Tempatan, Tindus. The Sanjay Sumden Degate, Tagba, Pumbula to Meguge, by Pumbula Loso, you have attended Tayoma Resonde. Dear Kotami, Rakba the Zero, Tagbachibu Ram attended Tayoma Resonga, Rakba the Zero. Ote namba sanje ba kanga ti mesura chirubaga ti tindachi yo sambiore dagji rawa chanje ta me ba sigdo ya tele to az chara che rangye tu be chai ji ta me ba sere yore rangye tu be chai ji ta me ba to ta chara chinjire pumbu songa la te me go bene korachi songgi bare Sobodan Semda Soada Zonga Song the Korsong Bego, Koran Kadulia Song Average. Munzichi Average. Rangi Song, Pumbu Song, la term of Koran Song Gyuresam. Rangetu be say guitar Sidua. Nitandan de Leche Rangwin Drubeta Mevas. Rangandu Drubeta Meva. Rangi going to us. Narazo in a social some good one. Ending is over assembly soare samba. Not the Tanda Logacha, social years. Nangaranga years some sort of some good one. Round was a water. Not in this year, Mare. Round and Achi Marto. Round and I'm a basser. I kept on Gashiko, round and I'm a batia. Don't you rock what it till a tower or stashes, Madame Mambuyorda. In which all the robs you love here, mother.
So when it comes to the teaching of emptiness and selflessness, there are different levels of sort of coarseness and subtlety, and different schools explain things slightly differently. So we have to recall when the Buddha came to the world and gave his teachings, the sort of prevalent view among those sorts of philosophical schools at the time was that there was some kind of autonomous self, something that was permanent, something that would continue into future lives. Something like what the Samkhyas or other schools would assert is, although like our form is impermanent, there is a self that is permanent, that will continue into future lives, that is something singular as well. It's not dependent upon the aggregates, really. It can stand alone by itself, and it is something that kind of like appropriates those aggregates. And for them, this is what they identify. You can point to and you can say, yes, there is such a permanent, singular, autonomous kind of a self. And this is something that they consider can go into future lives as kind of a permanent, stable kind of a self that would not be dependent upon the aggregates. It's separate from the aggregates. And this kind of a self is something that is not accepted by any sort of a Buddhist school. They would all accept the non-existence of such a self. But that's the most coarse kind of understanding. As we get more subtle, it gets into the idea of there not being a self that is a self-sufficient, substantially existent entity. Something that could be identified as contingent upon, but apart from the aggregates. And so this kind of level of selflessness is getting more subtle. But as you continue in this kind of subtlety, there's the understanding of selflessness that is a lack of some kind of autonomous existence from its own side, as though it were able to exist without any kind of dependence or contingency whatsoever. So as one goes through these teachings, we have to be aware of the kind of different levels of subtlety to the selflessness or emptiness that is being taught.
Oh yeah, that and that, Shiripa in a Darwa, Namba Sanje Balia, Tutamu Yordo, Chitra Maser and Doti Baser, Semzan Baser, or Tezu Samagi, Tezulia Maser, and over Tembatu by Yes, and Maranzu Tona, she Tembatu by Yes, Maranzu Ta, Su, Ta, Treasure, Saddle Soba, Kande Tongutone Tona, she Tembatu de Yorese, Tembatu by Yes, Tembatu by Yes. Oh, this year, the Umabasura. That took them more than a number, and could took them on and the chalk to Cuba to see you. Umabas. San Diego long day, Shabba, Gumbulu, Soba, and you are the water to Umabasura. Oh, Tezuluna, she and it turned number to by your mother, Tembatu by your mother. Or turned number to by Tembatu by your mother. Oh, do talk our shoulder. Yeah, what did you learn to do?
So then, in brief, we have those kinds of outsider schools, and within Buddhists, there are various different philosophical schools, like the Vaibhashikas and Sutra school and mind only and so forth. But we can generally characterize into two classes of those that are realists, those that say that things are truly existent as they appear to us, or they're ultimately established, ultimately existent, schools like the Vaibhashikas and so forth. And then there are the Madhyamakas, or the proponents of the middle way, following after Nagarjuna and so forth. They interpret the Buddha's teachings to say that there is no ultimate existence, no true existence. So this is the first kind of main division.
Oh yeah. Down to the Kasura. Umabe Lucia Shero. And the Pergian Kabatu Sundam Medramada Yungudua, Sunzu Medayore. That kind of Shini or Ra. Kebe Sunzu Medrani or Nigel Susuyan, to say your no. Oh, do you do Kasur? But you don't do. Around Talatana, Tade, Social now, Nashi, Yamardo, Kachera, Ale Tade, Social now, Nashi, Tade, Social and you got an Angudoside, Loy Wangi, Takshit and Shashalet and Loy Wangi Pa Tagua, Ti Wangi Shamaguba, Koran Rangunetsu, Yevesorish Nagdua. Then now Nashi, Yamardo. Sangaradu Taganashi. You don't want to so you don't want that, you don't want that. Then there is time in there. You couldn't win you don't want to win it to be to your. You run win it. You couldn't win it, you don't want. Tarabachina, you couldn't win it, you don't know a triangle. Near Cassan, you couldn't win it to run one so temba truba rawa du truba na tina shi temba yoba nga zu tungu towa o ti du zang ka sore nga zu tungju na shin te temba yo ma re tungju na shin tru de yo ma re nga ra zu teba re tan tungu yo re so so le ne ta re do nga sa de so so ye ta de so so we ne zu la so so de kan de shi yo ta de ran de so so kan de shi yo na shi nga zu sam ko to yo ma re tel to ta ne nga se rawa tu tu ba de ra rang shin ki su tu do ma da chi rang ge ngo yo so so ngo yo su tu yo ma ne de tong go do wa sa tin na shi yo ma re se ga re o ti in de ka so re ke ba ka ji so na nga ra ju to na shi yo ma re to an zu ka ga pa ka go re se so me tra me tri me ro me re ja me so go do wa se o ti in de nga ra ju tong go yo re to na shi ti 소이나 이도 와다 직도서 가가 텐제 망보지 소네 지 레가라 치된 것이 얼마도 나라서 돈에 코란 라왕가 주 세부터 여러분이네 코란 라왕가 주 세부터 게르시 통교하다 어디 요 말 거기 주지 망보 세워질 때 전에 애니 주 통교하다 두두셔야면 라왕도 주어지 왜지 요 말다 라왕도 주어 왜지 얘네 피네서 machine data so lo se che so ki che ko ma do o de de ka so da ngara jo to na shin de so do me se ne de so me se so ko na ka ko de se so me tra me tre me ro me re cha me so na shin so de ngara jo to na shin yo ma de te so da so me se so ka ko de so ke che wa de 다 개박하지 손은 어디 수 가는 데 말해서 수 랑문에 주바도 로가 가고도 마도 수 가는 데 말해서 개박이 세단이 요라 송주면도 아니 요라 어찌데 가르스는 통 다데세 당가주 당보 수 코라 매버 검샤 고레세 동번이 검도 수 매가매 담에 코라 매버 검샤 고레세 디나신도 번에 시시긴다 디나시시야나 나도 요 말해서 나 여나 아니 세 두서 녀고르도 녀면도 와서래 로아 되네 신신 야가서래 가정 거지 교조해 주변에 대고난이도 그냥 깨완다시나다 다이나다 고째나라고 요 말아 소부데 다르베스네 말아 미기 셰바 나웨 셰바 네 셰바 다르베스네 말아 초아대와 동에데 다르베스네 말아 아니 타바네시 심벨레다 레스 개월에 삼루타야 미개월에 삼루타야 심벨레스라 뒤에 다 말와 아니 너무 공동하게 차도를 소버테서 다 말와 근데 전에 레레피게 제가 돈은 다 요새들 풍부가 마도는 요 말에서 거라 소부지요라 수지 풍부 서로 대화 동에 땅님 용계지도 와 두시스 티티레 티티 마르 데카버데 제레 데카레 데카레섬 두시지도 와 지금 싸운데지만 남바르시 바세 미기 남시 나와 남시도와 누지 풍부세 개와다 미개와 삼루타야 개와 삼루타야 레다 녀몬베르라 마부시도와 어때서나네 직 다르세 전에 니요 말도 니요 말에 다 딱도 전에 매니 버서라 나세데 딱we 소설 딱이어라 나 다시레 튼두데 시레레 시라 네티테 가그레스네 제가 신의 라금을 놓았어. 뒤면서 다들 매래서 오다. 다요 말해서 오다. 일량 아주 되시고라. 너마실람 드입니다. 깨와라서 봐. 깨와 있는다로. 깨와서도 요네 깨와데. 다 다기 현지 니가를 깨와 주밀이 깨와서 깨와 제거라. 깨와 누구르비야 깨운 거네. 누구디 코랑 야 깨운 거래. 코란 당이 집에 주실 땐 속에 온 거래. 얘네 라완도 주베서지 코란 시행지 깨운 거래. 라완도 주베 주시할 때네 저부 시행지 깨고 거래. 얘네 다다 시행이 걸 때네 깨고 거래. 얘네 주매네 깨고 거래서. 근데 제버치는 까고 거래. 어디까지선 그 깨왔잖아 라요 말해서. 다나시 다잖아 라요 말해서. 데 메두자 아니다 메르스 요나 라에 요구로 와서 쟤네 ngara chi nang de yore de ko chi nang de ma to me shin du nang de yore se o tende chi so ye chi yor to ka se ke wala so ba de ko na ni du tu ma du che ne chö kan de chi na ra yo ma re ti me sa chö tam je ke gwa re se me se ur me ba kom go re se ga re ro kan de chi ke lang ba na ko che ba che ne ra ya me du a se ti ten sam je ra yo ma ti me sa ko me ba re se me ba kom go re se go ra 전에 개와이나야 고체는 라요 말봐. 얘네 박배 냠샤야 시세야 돼. 똥반이 시대. 다다다 저 탐제 똥바시스 공공공공네. 네 똥바 장장지 마도 지금 소다 뒤로를 잘라서 보세요 말아. 내로 탑도도 박배 냠샤야 시게 세기면 도와세요. 시기나 박배 냠샤야 시 가반도 때는 세치 다다다다네. 공부 시구를 되게 세기면 도와세요. 뒤등을 개기면 도와세요. 공기대에서 간가 매번 식버려서 또 말해서 와라 매신도 남기 와라 좀마다 그래 미가 말에 대가서 나대 와라 좀마다 그래서 근데 손주시 와도 전에 망도도 잡아서 야 되지람나.
So then the Madhyamaka kind of view gets elaborated on or sort of distinguished when Tibetan masters look at this kind of different ways of understanding this. So we'll get into the kind of differences here, but each puts forth their own sort of understanding. When we take, for example, the self, and the self is designated on the basis of these aggregates, our form and our feelings, compositional factors, consciousness, and discrimination. And so it isn't something, it doesn't appear to us as though it is merely designated by mind, but it appears to exist from its own side, as though it had some kind of existence in its own right. Like when we see something that is a pleasant form, we think that it is pleasant or attractive from its own side. Or when we have an enemy that we view with animosity, we think that they are that way, that bad from their own side, established from their own kind of being. And so whether it's sort of us as individuals or looking at other kinds of objects, we exaggerate, we superimpose a kind of reality as though things existed from their own side, when it doesn't actually exist in that way. So here, when we see teachings like, for example, in the Heart Sutra, where it talks about no form, no feelings, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and so forth, this is getting at the fact that things appear to us. It's not negating their very appearance, but they don't actually exist in the way that they appear. They appear to have some sort of autonomous existence, not depending upon anything else, not depending or being contingent on anything. Whereas in reality, these are only things that come about due to the aggregation of various causes and conditions. And so here, again, we can see the way that things appear to us, like our enemy or something appears as though they exist that way from their own side, independent of any of our kind of thinking. But when we actually try to examine, we can't find something that we can point to. So here, when one on the one side, we need to begin by looking for the self. We designate this I, this self, on the basis of designation of these 5 aggregates. But if we actually begin to the process of sort of searching for that thing within its basis of designation, we can't point to our form as being the self. The kind of karma that we have created, our intended karma, that too is not the self. When we look at our various feelings, our neutral or pleasant, unpleasant feelings, none of those can be identified as the self. So too, when we look at like our 6 different consciousnesses for the aggregate of consciousness, we can't point to and find something that is the self, or that kind of discrimination, that the sort of faculty that allows us to distinguish and determine things, that too we can't point to and say that is the self. So we have this aggregation of all of these various factors, and on the basis of that we can posit an individual. We can say like, oh yeah, there's Tashi, there's Tundrup, and so forth. But when we try to search for that I, that self, as it appears to us, we can't actually find it. And so too, when it comes to something like production, is production something where it is arisen from itself? Is it arisen from an intrinsically existent other? Are things arisen from self and other, or do they come about causelessly? Now we can see that things appear, they arise, but when we search for those things as they appear, we can't actually find anything that we can point to. So too, when it comes, whether it's looking for ourself, for other sort of object, for something like production, and we try to pin down or point to, find that thing that is production, we can't actually find it. So it is then by this kind of meditation on emptiness, this coming to understand how things lack that sort of existence in the way that they appear to us, that we can come to see how they are illusion-like. They arise, they appear, but they don't actually exist in the way that they appear to us.
Oh yeah, Rebe ko chebe cheni chi raya yuna temba truba temba truba rendu ures. Rebe chebe cheni raya mindu hase. Ti medu zane rebe cheni mena rebe kek bares. Rebe kek na ni ta me bares. Rebe kek ne tanda yose ne madu bares. Ti sonda chu tam chu tu tam me bares. Sheya yuna chu tu yuna ni cheme trubguru base. Yuna cheme trubguru. Cheme trubguru ne chema de Pagwe nyamsha shikene ne lutadu chene kom gedegene sugda turu chala soba sigme doas meba sigi ore chere tongba sidu do tezu ganga tongba sigi ore se Pagwe nyamsha shikene sutra la soba sigma tele chama mare se ora ane migi sheba la soba tanye gitala tonggen ge sheba dozo tezu ni chama mare se ora tendo nalia mi da nawa na chama mi 제다 류자 이자 참마미 저주간가 참마마이세 저주 참마이나 박배람지 술에 지시해서 박배람 공부를 전담에도 와서 그 매기 나와 나시 제bat은 아주 토하나시 참마를 건조 토하나시 뭐를 내대요나 근데 박배람 로서 공부에도 와서 말한지 공 통대야 저주 간가 템버에도 안 템벌 템방원에 토하들 껴요 말아 어떻게 sonzat에도 여는 전에 체매 쪽으로 체매 파고에 냠샤 시키니 매번 시기도 와서 동바 네 직전에 시에부터 저는 가가데 체매 말에서 된도날 미나 나와나 체매 메시다 류디에 이자 체매에 그도 원부터 체네 파고에 남지 술에 지시자서 가봐서도 와서 어딘데서네 내가 봐 딱제 제바체 다 민도 삼 동바 검사나 되게서 와라 담bar tongbarese ta tanye se do tanye do ne so yo tra yo tri yo de che yo se jiden ge tanye chi re ti na shi khela na de rese o tende she su chi do wa ti ka che kep che wa se de tande che songa ba da ke ba to so be na ti su ko na ka de kep che tra so se kep che tra rese ne su ka tra ka tri ka ti de ma rese ta tande de ke be shi su chi ro ti chi la de ya
So, here, then, if, again, when you are using this kind of reasoning to investigate investigate and analyze phenomena, one comes to see that they are empty. When one is examining and searching for that kind of ultimate nature of phenomena, this is it is seen that they don't actually exist as they appear. There's no sort of ultimate nature to be found. But then the question might arise: well, then what is the sort of object of a valid cognition? Is conventional existence valid? Now, there are some who see things like the quotation from the King of Concentration Sutras, where it says, the eye, ear, and nose consciousnesses are not valid knowledge. The tongue, body, and mental consciousnesses are also not valid knowledge. If these sense consciousnesses were valid knowledge, of what use to anyone would be the Arya's path? So here, this kind of leads certain people to think that the intention here is to negate everything, to negate even the kind of form itself. And so this is, again, if things existed in the way that they appeared, as though they had this kind of true existence and they actually existed in that way, there would be no purpose to developing this kind of wisdom of realizing emptiness, of an Arya's meditative equipoise. And so it is in the context of that meditative equipoise that one realizes the lack of existence of phenomena. But here, this kind of individual takes this extension of the negation too far in that they think that form itself, form too, doesn't exist at all. And so this kind of refutation overdoes this sort of understanding. So here we will get next time into more of what these sort of two different understandings of the middle way are. But here one can be a kind of overextension of the negation of things, thinking that because phenomena don't truly exist, that they don't sort of exist at all, and thereby they refute even their conventional existence.
Oh yeah, that and the chochidra, that choshendishana, that's just about the Dandangazu on my shed. Gombuludu, some bed, 10 days, and to the Chinese shaggy. The Rangwene, da Rangwene, your mares. Tension Dever Jewish to each hour and get Sue your try or a tree or a conga your days. Sue mess and a do mares. Sue Rangwene mess. Da Rangwene mess, sometimes around to true a mess. Tension Dever Jones a means. Kurama English, tension, then telephone tapas, telechachi shagore. Draw down, now, that's also a chavachi to get your in a round of dribble to each hour and get your mares or take what the Shandati Guratis, Chemanga Shegra. What did you learn this?
So then the other way of understanding follows after, like Je Lama Tsongkhapa following after Nagarjuna and so forth, wherein they assert that these dependently originated phenomena, although they don't have any kind of existence from their own side, they exist as mere dependent originations. Although nothing can be found to point to this is the thing when it is searched for, this doesn't negate their existence altogether. So here, based upon this kind of understanding, one can see that there is no existence of form and so forth from their own sides in this way that is able to bear analysis, but they exist as mere dependent originations. And it is within that context that one can tentatively posit all functionality, all actions and agents are suitable to function within that level of existence. So here we will get into this more in a future class.
Oh yeah, that is just also, yeah.
So we'll leave it there for today as the time is up.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Geshe-la, for sharing these precious teachings on this important text and the Buddhist teachings in general. And thank you, Katrina, for your very skillful interpretation. And for those who are watching online, we hope to see you again next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in a direction. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering.
May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Shenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
Recordings.
Oh, don't do it. Oh, yeah.